想着，我在那边呢，真的想不起我当时想这个去我完成战上，第什么的同一个呢？他这样第做空，你弄的我拿去投入比他我从那的参着这些都是都，第你的做空也来都，第头这些呢，从那的，当个朋友就是从那的，跟几期有些的人。你当初的他那是这种风格，或者说是你第二个有些拿起洋人，现在这样有些的这些小事的，他对同的这个你他那个在马家过程是我刚才说是，把考得我这些啊，我特别在马祖去记下来这个对那嘛周边去，这个做这些主要这个对同的从那，然后这个现在我就把多了对这个前途的对这个上个有些，对这个对同的当然刚才他本来是多拿出些个意思。
Well, thank you very much for coming. I'm so pleased to be here. Today, before I make any comments on the subject matter, and then that is about how to practice the Buddhism, which sounds like being created by the translator, Denton and Tosa. And so I don't know whether I can handle this subject matter well. But in any case, and first of the very first thing is that thank you very much for Khanpo, the abbot of the Dharma Soyan in the Dharma Center, and giving me this opportunity, and Kwan and the representative of the manager of the center, and allow me to have this opportunity with you all and talk about the Dharma. And well, I think we should not take this as a kind of a serious, formal Buddhist teaching, and rather we should consider this is a form of a dialogue. And I prefer, kind of a question and answer, since this is just about how to practice Buddhism, and maybe that's what will serve the purpose better. So it means that you can stop me or raise your hands, and whenever you feel you have questions or doubts about the topic. In general, mankind so far have created various system or forms of religion and traditions of spirituality, which, if you're looking into the essence of or the fundamental purpose of that very creation of or introduction of the religion, all kinds of forms of religion, you will see all of them are aimed to serve one purpose, that is to help the human being, the mankind, to achieve the happiness and to free from the suffering and the causes of the suffering. So as the common ground, the common purpose, and then in the sense that we all are doing and talking and try to achieve the same thing. Well, in the Buddhist context, the Buddha, without exception, just like other religions, in order to help the mankind achieve this goal of achieve happiness and avoid or overcome the suffering, who taught or introduced the system and based upon the three sort of perspective, or he introduced the teaching that's based on the ground, the idea of ground and path and fruition. Because each religion, in fact, if you look in them, you will see they do have the idea of ground or the foundation or the basis of their approach. So they have a specifically designed approach to achieve the goal, and then they also introduce the final, the ultimate achievement. So in Buddhism, in order to help the mankind achieve the ultimate goal, the Buddha will first introduce the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is he would lay out as the foundation, the basis of the Buddhist approach, and to achieve the happiness and to overcome the suffering and the causes of suffering. Which means if you understand the fundamental teachings of Four Noble Truths, the Noble Truth of the cause of suffering, the causes of suffering, and the path, the end of the liberation, the Nirodha, the liberation itself, and the path to achieve the liberation, then you will see that the essence of what is the essence of Buddhism.
他老上这个积极养人，当当嘛，牛当他把这用完了，这个托马的这个上路，当年上路就是当于托尼这个等于几个刻画当另外这个他和在这个人的托马的跟我说这个是西下当他们西朗多西的那个当他把的我的电脑中国的托马的我说这个门头边这个盖上是加的人吧，第西个了，我你托马上的兄弟去。토마르 되지 지고 거기가 나는 등이 보게 되고 어떻게 되게 알아서 시고와 대도 되니 등에 대용 용서께 되게 재미있게 시와 많이 버리 제칠라 되니 되게 중국이 지금 뒤지 사와도 근종된 봐 야 대도 그다 근종된 봐 지고 등에 때문에 나 뒤도 지금 오늘 지금도 봐 잠시 되게 하면 좋아 뒤 제칠 사와 제칠 거 어디 제 근종된 사와 된 거죠 통니 电工就有吧，但是这个他那个统计有吧，第二个什么说的，第几是个话，那个个电报我听过等等，听过等电用，希望咱们都把两人经历、两头经历都通过的，两个不下的，他这个写了下个就黄上个我们他写两个不下的，第一个都是济南上，这当然爸爸，这是晓得这些。
So how the Buddha laid out the foundations of his entire teaching, or the created framework of his the approach to happiness and overcome the suffering and cause of suffering. Again, so the answer is within the structure of the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths basically is was introduced to the mankind based upon the very phenomenology of our very existence. So our very existence, the phenomenology of our existence shows that anything that's as far as the understanding is concerned, there's always involved the causes and the effects. So, so since the cause and the effect is involved, and which is the very reality of the existence, so therefore, and the Buddha began his teaching, and by encouraged his followers And through the introduction to the causes of our very reality, our basic condition, human condition, the existence is the noble truth of dukkha. The noble truth of dukkha is the truth of the suffering. And because Buddha said, in order to achieve your own goal, that is achieve the happiness, overcome the suffering, causes of suffering, you have to recognize your condition and your very own, the nature of your very own existence. That is dukkha, this is the suffering. And once you diagnose it, understand that's your fully recognize where you are, what's your condition, the existence, and then you need to move on to approach the second noble truth. That's the noble truth of samudaya, which means that's the causes of suffering. Because we know that anything that to unfold or taking place became something that's experientially you can it makes sense to you. That means there is a cause involved. So therefore, since the suffering is our own experience, and then we need to, through the understanding of samudaya, or the cause of suffering, and to see what is the exactly contributed or brought us to the point where we feel suffer or unsatisfied. And then further, the Buddha introduced the was to just understand your condition and you understand the cause of suffering. That's not enough. You have to seeking for the possibilities of overcome the suffering. So at this point, Buddha introduced the third noble truth. Third noble truth is noble truth of cessation or nirodha. No, because up until the critical analysis and the research or in the study, and when you will find and there is possibility you can overcome. In other words, you can stop or you can ending and the very unwanted suffering. So that's the cessation. And so when that is confirmed, that is kind of you get the conviction of the possibilities of overcoming the suffering, cause of suffering, and then you need to move on. Say what can actually helps you to brought you to this state of liberation, state of enlightenment, which is free from suffering, causes of suffering. That is the fourth noble truth, the noble truth of a marga, or the noble truth of the path.
Tati 제때는 동호들 등이 실시하지 시등들라 당소 등을 하라고 제가 오늘의 등이 지등이 되게 정서를 잡아다가 일이 되게 등이 근데 저와 차도 시등이 등이 숨치를 바로 더 영상으로 조동하나 지금 등이 지등이 지금 지금 사정의 등이 되게 주도고 등이 지금 나타나서 등이 대 다치 장그 뭐 주지 뭐 그러는 거 지금 다 뭔가 미사가 먼저 받아 쳐다 받는지 쳐다 리스타트 먼저 봐. 그 제리 되게 돼야 돼. 뭐도 실시하게 수시고 제리 되게 정착하듯 시든 좀 무시고. 다 같이 맞춰도 그래서 그것도 자 제리 되게 되라 모두 되게 지금 봐. 양나 컨셉 그로 들어서지. 지금 서치기 치인가시가 코디어로 봐. 뒤한거 코드가 저 등으로 와 맞지 본종아. 그래서 저 여기 당도 던지리 등에 대응 등에 동호시었더니 지금 그래서 다 혼난 제리 등에서는 되게 서치기서라 내가 강한 반탐치를 받쳐들이 되게 원나도 지금 정의 등도 중앙에 뒤로 공통으로 군 뒤에 지금 매당 뒤에 사와로 지금은 지금 등이 근고 남아 삼치 잘라 코드가 되어를 놓아 다가 대형적이 되어 단체보다 많이 봐 대리 진행을 못되나 양쪽 뒤에 무슨 비트 등에서 문제 좋아 다 뒤에 단위 서치다가 뭐 지가 가서 제리 등에서 지금 뒤에 있는 거야 그래서 저거 당도 지금 거라나 라고 지금 소나니 단제리 등에 뭐지가 되게 이런 뜻이가 뒤에 한거 등뭐 마시고 한거 당도 되게 대화도 저 때문에 그런 거 대화 라스트는 좀 돼요. 되게 지금 날에 뒤에 다 서치게 되어 뒤에다 지금 탑실제로 받아 되니 지금 등에 더 받아도 좀 틀린 거야. 그래서 저거 그랬어요.
Let's work on and see whether we can figure out and the first reality and our very nature of our existence or the conditions, which is the noble truth of the dukkha. And dukkha again means suffering. When you think about the suffering, and then in Buddhism there are three forms of different categorizations of suffering, which is first is the suffering of suffering or suffering of the pain, and second is suffering of the change, and the third is the pervasive suffering. The way the Lord Buddha will introduce us and his followers and to understand one's own very condition and or the reality is first you have to know that there is a suffering, and this suffering is the first is obvious, that it is a suffering or suffering of pain, which means it's something that you experienced and then occurs to you. It's obvious, right? And empirically, and you know that is the case. So that's including physical pain, mental pain, right? That's the first the form of suffering. And second form of suffering is become subtle. It's not that obvious. It's called the suffering of a change. So suffering of a change is something it's kind of hidden in a way. Why? Because we would call that is a pleasure, or something is pleasurable or is desirable. And for instance, that when we feel that the place where we are the temperatures become lower and feel cold, and then we naturally want to either put the clothes on or move to a warmer place. And then when you experience that the sense of warmness or the comfortable, and by relocate yourself, that moment that your experience of pleasure or something is kind of is doing you a favor, and that feeling itself, or that sensation itself, in general we call it pleasure and happiness, or something we created as something good. In fact, because it's hidden, it is kind of subtle, by its very nature, that is form of suffering. It's not by definition or by itself, and by its nature, it is not a happiness or it's not the pleasure. Why? Because after a while, and then you begin to feel it is too warm, or it's something that you need to move to a different location, and why the sense of warmth is kind of overwhelming, and itself as evidence, and clearly indicates the ordinary person's sense of pleasure or sense of pleasant is indeed by its nature is suffering.
사태니 차원도 시시되는 야 대도 유지라고 매번 고라 지와론디 같아서 디그 고라 집시케 접시케지 영모티 청와도 맞춰버터 라고는 버티는 이 도가 대영도 저도 오늘이 저 내가 선부 뛰는 진심이 번 고르고 대리랑 소다오디 다 지금 리턴 영모도 뒤로 언거 지금 지와던 진체가 다 제가 나치고 대라튼 차원도 시든지 어떤 인생 어떻게 쳐들어서 뒤 차원도 시든지 뒤 정신탕 맞춰서 등이 진만 쳤다 등 용과 어떻게 쳐들면 대라 차원도 시든지 다섯 거리 치트가 제서 그러나도 등이 실으셔야지 시고 뒤 차원도 시든지 뒤 리턴 뒤에 정신 대도 다시니 대도 공식시고 어디 동도 그러지.
The third form of suffering is a pervasive suffering. As I said, there are three forms of suffering. One is kind of obvious, the first form of suffering, and the second is kind of is hidden, or is not that obvious. And the third one, this pervasive suffering, is hidden phenomena. Right? Why? Because it's not obvious to or manifested to us is very visible, sort of empirically, and you can get a sense of it. That's what is going on. You cannot. Why? Because that's also the reason called pervasive suffering. And so this is takes great deal of study and to get us a clear concept about what progressive suffering is all about. Well, regardless how hard or how subtle and then this form of suffering is, according to the Buddha and the Buddhist teaching, the progressive suffering is signified by the very 5 aggregates, the reality of our very existence. Right? That, for example, that the way we've been brought to the world, right? And the way our very existence been constituted, right? That's your 5 aggregates and our sense of self and so on and so forth. So, but this thing, this very reality we call our existence, itself is involved or created by and the karma and afflictive emotions. So meaning that we've been pushed by the very cause of our existence, that is karma and afflictive emotion. Right? So even though we do not want to experience another forms of 4 sufferings, for example, the suffering of birth, suffering of aging, and suffering of sickness, and suffering of death. Right? That we do not want to continue or experience or to deal with this kind of all these sufferings. However, there's no choice for us. We are subject to enduring and then this suffering. And as long as we are still traveling or we're still being tied up to the circle, the patterns, repeated patterns of death and rebirth, we call it samsara. So as long as the samsara is continued and your very existence brought up or created by the karma and afflictive emotion, and then you have to continue to experience the sufferings. So this is why the 3rd suffering, the progressive suffering, is considered subtle and hard to understand.
다디 차원없이 등에 대한 같은 종이 있죠. 리통용문 제가 대영 사와트 몽아 마르케 온 거요. 봐. 몽아 마르케 사와 강사가 당선제 티트요. 봐. 디트 그쳐서 그늘 진짜 디트 그 등에 대비 이제 근종대 봐. 근종도 홍어를 샤돼요. 먼저 비등을 진정성성 강소에는 좀 그거나 디저 강리중의 적용용 디사와 마르카 등등 디트 산이트 홍 언제 요면 틈을 뒤쪽에서 못한 거디 근종 홍어를 샤지 송한테 그렇죠. 단디 근종 홍어를 샤지 디 근종 등에 대비 근종에 대비 홍보나 디 홍시지 특유의 대대종 말하면 디트 적용용 강리중의 당선돼야 디 가리치기면 당선돼야 그 당선신 비닥 대야 말이야 되면 뒤에서 거를 때부터 더 당선하시기 전에는 말이야 돼 실제로도 제트슨 생기 요매 그 나서도 바바가 당니 디 스타트해야 나서티 다점타 소소부터 말아 덕덕화래 더든 이우리 더 생리돼야 돼 돈이 연구를 된대요. 아마도 나와상지위 제스코 나치 양내신들이나 이우르도 다점점 못해라 지금 정도지 그게 지금 당선돼야 뒤인전체 적도 하고 당선 그 종이 들어도 당 지금 림지시 텐트치 리수하고 등이 용하고 마 단위 되어 봐 대니 소소도 잡아서 시니 그런 것들은 좀 봐도나 실제로 그런 거 지금 저처럼 다 지금 시험 내면 나서도 시켜요 봐. 또 그거니 정수가 바라 지로 동거와 지금 신 말하고 하더라도 바티 바라 지니 여러 동지위면 다시 지송하이나 당하도 지금 능력해야 되던 로 실제로 당선돼야 돼 지금 돌라마니와 공인문이 그때 실제로 이마 뒤에 년부 너무 또 이해라고 그 남자가 보나 고직된 단위 홍지도 요바 그때도 당하도 지금 당하 봐봐 대고 소용나 아주 그 거과 못해야 모든 돼야 돼 능력들이 다리 바로 모든 뜻이 요바데 라ンチョが디스타트 돈이 또 시지나 던 고된데야 돼. 대마도 지금 이치치 다 바란 좀 받은 것도 용기 요리지. 即将自己当做这个讲他我换不给领导我的送完的些。
So earlier I mentioned that the way Buddha introduced the path to enlightenment and by starting say, introduce encourage his follower to recognize our condition as the suffering. So he explicitly said that you must recognize the suffering, or suffering is the subject that you have to recognize. That's how he said. So suffering is the subject that you have to recognize. Well, having that in mind, and then let's talk about how to overcome the root cause of the samsaric existence, which is pervasive suffering. Right? When you think about the pervasive suffering, and obviously you have to think about what's the causes involved. Like earlier we talked about, the causes are basically involved is twofold. One is the afflictive emotion, or the disturbing emotion, and another is karma. Right? Here, the afflictive emotion is again has to be through the investigation and through the study, you need to go pinpoint what is exactly the afflictive emotion is all about, and from where the afflictive emotions arrived or derived. So our careful, critical investigation would lead us to the point we can see all the sufferings and causes. All sufferings is contributed by our misperception of the self. Right? This misperception of self is also called ignorance. Right? So ignorance is the primary cause of all kinds of suffering. At this case, is the pervasive suffering. So the misperception of self is the wrong idea or the wrong notion when you're concerning or consider your identity, who you really are. Right? And since we are prior to our investigation, and we go with the innate sense of who we are. Unfortunately, our innate sense of being, or innate sense of who we are, is driven by the ignorance, but is heavily influenced by this misperception of self, which is ignorance. So because this misperception of self, and then we become self-centered, and then from there, and then we created the karma, right? And the accumulation of the karma, and then now is combined with this afflictive emotion. Again, classically, that is the afflictive, the grasping at self of a person, or misperception of self. And then, so they are kind of hand in hand in this sort of reinforce each other, and that's how this samsaric reality being not only created but being sustained and being maintained. So therefore, after like we understood what Buddha said, recognize or identify, clearly understand the suffering first. Once we have done the first work, the thing, which is recognize suffering, then in this particular point means the suffering, pervasive suffering. And then we needed to think about, is there any chance we can get out of this samsaric, the patterns of repeated, the death, the rebirth, and so on and so forth. Whether we can get it out of this circle. And so your investigation will give you a clear understanding. That is by root out or by eliminating, abandoning, you can call, if you like, and so the grasping at self person, or by overcoming the misperception of self, and so you will stop in accumulation of the karma. When the karma is no longer affect you or being created and due to or because your elimination or successful eradication of the grasping at self or person or misperception of self, and you automatically, at this point I would say that your research or your investigation and point you to the very possibility that is cessation, right? Or nirodha. The cessation nirodha, which is like the ending point of the samsaric reality. Right? And so once you study your investigation and successfully leads you to the conviction where you see, oh, no matter how, what the reality is going on, and my status quo is, but the cessation is possible, right? And because I have the way, there is possibility, and I can address, I can root out, I can eliminate grasping the self of a person, free from the misperception of self. So then your conviction, the conviction you gain, and then will give you the confidence, and then you know that nirvana or the cessation is possible.
지금 토자는 모든 등을 예시 상담 대통 탑 상습지 센터 리뷰니 지금 똑같이 무치 상습적으로 남아서 그냥 쓰는 바가 되니 남고를 시작시 시간은 공사 대고 그런 공사 시작이 나는 데라 당도 그 로칭당 송송 거니 제가 좀 기본장 지금 친구랑지 남고마다 대 받쳐서 주고 당도 남고를 시작이야 남고자라 대중으로 영 지금 중원장 친구들한테 돼 랑가 로통 테비고니 지금 문도비 등을 대도 거기 탑라티니 랑가 몬테시지 그 지금 내와 담아 어디를 지나가서 지금 그래 도시지 탑들라 아주 더 지금 중원통 탐바 장통 탐바 지금 더 친구통 로통고니 어떤지 고요리지.
And the third noble truth, nirodha, or the noble truth of cessation, which is basically is a blow out. Blow out the suffering and causes of the suffering, which is again, which is the state of liberation. State of liberation or nirvana, and is our fundamental goal, is our ultimate the achievement. And then the question is how we can get there, how we can make that materialize that very the ultimate goal, the nirvana. And speak of this, and so you are coming to the fourth noble truth, magga, or the noble truth of the path. And in Buddhism, when you think about the path which leads you to the nirvana, a state of enlightenment, generally speaking, the path will be designed to suit or to fulfill the needs of three different kind of individuals. And the individual who are, we call the person with a small capacity, person with intermediate capacity, and a person with a great capacity. So this is a kind of a very very well and the design or the approach, and because as a human being, and we are different, and in terms of capacity, in terms of the intellectual understanding, predispositions or personal the personalities and so on so concerned. So we are is different. So therefore, in the part of for small the capacity, and then they can do something, approach that path, and then to improve their spiritual path. And the person with the intermediate capacity, they can also approach according to their own background, their interest. So, and then as for the greater person with greater capacity, and then we know that we have the path of Mahayana. So that means that the first two paths, which is designed for the person, what do we call it, the Shravaka. So the followers of the Shravaka path, and then they will working on and the teachings which are suitable for them. But the path and the individual who choose the Mahayana path and the Bodhisattva's path, and they will adopt the great perfection and of wisdom, which is the Mahayana teaching.
他那瓦上去纪念人的送嘛送，那瓦上去起的我嘛个查的，他刚你讲的就或者那他那个九层七浪当这个托尼，这个上高中的当过去，或者是天地的话，天地的这个接头，这个天地这个接头，他小孩的气象还那样，的这个那瓦上去起这个这样的这个起这个这样的地，大把清楚有嘛的是，他就小孩一种孩的气象呢，他给予小当，人物小。 现在这那这上些课，就这个哪上去两人这的多，把真多要嘛，现在也是学生的同意这样，一天同他们一天的起，这个这个一天的六人，说两个人六啊，用那这个主要是把半期起这个我多到的多的那个什么的马上我的，或者这个也是学生当学的把的哪上去起两人些嘛是挺重要嘛，他哪上去起两人些吧。 你个在这可能就不定了，他天地六啊当这个他年个当年这国家个的多白那样，第就七万八千的样多少年天多少年，这个我都世界的人千年这个我都蛮多，七万八千的因为人们的那个，第一这个那个钱呢，天地上是个地半通的吧，样就是这个他另外这个国家呢，这拿出把这个国家民族的，第一就要什么八千的把它说说呢。 肯定多少，按照当地路你们的那把的，按照从那等于做了那把嘛，这那什么可能，这么些他是，他最起码呢，咱就是啊，人家这个他们看我光放的鸟就多个上的上把了，娘托呢，他今年是娘主托呢，他就第我托只要是嘛马送的，娘今年等于娘没过，他他们看我这个地方的特别他了，他说嘛就把。 人们嘛那所谓讲，你们这些工作吃不到的这种的，第一头他们把东西比上面那么叫呢，他做这个哪上去起个马萨这个马萨呢，就两人起的样子，而且不晓得你这个有的是。
Often people would make a sort of publicly make the announce or identify themselves. I claim, say, I'm Buddhist and I practice Buddha Dharma. Well, here, Buddha Dharma, we have to understand what really Buddha Dharma means. And otherwise, we may think that we are practicing Buddha Dharma, but in reality, probably not. For example, if you say, my goal is to be happy in this life, and my highest purpose of life is to achieve, to enjoy and life here on earth, and for myself. If you concentrate and focus on your individual's pleasure and for this life alone, and then even if you use the words of Dharma, or perhaps you are indeed like chanting or doing something, engaging with Buddhist rituals and practices, since your ultimate goal and the purpose is for individuals' pleasure and for this life alone. So therefore, literally speaking, that is not what the Buddha Dharma means. And the Buddha Dharma, and at the lowest level, having said that, of course, you could be a good person, and having a decent life, so to be a good man, a good-hearted person. All these are, and even if you just focus on this life alone, and for the sake of your own interest, which is a great quality, which has the spiritual quality, we never deny that. But that doesn't reflect what the Buddha Dharma is. So Buddha Dharma at the lower level, and in the context of the three individuals, and so the individual who are at the bottom level, and you may say that he or she understand or accepted the ideas of reincarnation, and do believe causes effect, a law of cause effect, and understand that after the death, and what determines your future well-being is solely dependent upon what you have done in this lifetime. Okay? So the individual who accepted the idea of reincarnation and then aimed to say, I do not want to myself be reborn in the three lower realms, but I want to reborn as a human being, or better, like a celestial being, means like born in the heaven, right? To be in the heaven, and to appreciate the celestial body, and appreciate the pleasantness and happiness of the divine being. And if you are the individual who comes to the Buddha Dharma aimed to avoid the lower rebirth or bad rebirth, but your highest goal is to obtain the human body or regain the human body, and otherwise to obtain the celestial body, become the god or goddess, and which then, for that reason, and you adopted the Buddha Dharma and use as the path, as the means to achieve your goal. You are that form of Buddha Dharma. You have practiced. We say yes, that's the Buddha Dharma. But again, that's the lower level or basic form of Buddha Dharma.
That detail, 지금 나송도 지목과 미 대화도 토바도 바이나요. 다 지통도 체스코리 다 지금 니크부 대화 그바상상 말도 지금 단테 등에 다통은 저희 대화도 통매봐. 양통 미 지와라나 등은 나서는 거. 디니 양쪽을 밑에가 실제로 보셔 초초나서 지니 양송 만송도 뭐지 당 마트 바지나 등에가 저 당타매 바라는 등이 맞다 용거와 대상도 좀 거니 다 대타이 나는 거 보다 봐야나요. 대타이 지금 판도지 모든 민중아 저는 정부 그 판도거나 당하도 지금 자원없이 등하면 등이 진종사 자와 당선제야 돼. 했다니 빠지니 등이 했다니 민중아도 실틈 못 들어가는 거니 다 런이 결혼이라 지도나 했다니 등이 다 들었던 자리 대화 다 달아다가 뒤에서 도고 삼니 뒤에 삼다가 돈도 주려 지민용아 돈이 뒤에 도배 타고라 딱 말씀 시지마 시지마치가 또 지원 장도 삼아 지원 장시 대대선 받더니 또 등에 지원 장도 충분해야 돼. 다 지체서 그렇지 상도 자체 중 돈이 para 삼도 돈 로제치 중 돈이 para 단에 들어서 뒤에 쳐도 다 소치시나 다랑에 그거 공사 똑고요. 나와서 지정년세되나 지금 중앙대야 정보차별진 디콘난도에 지원 저거 그만도에 지원 전부 그만야라 가르쳐 적은도 년는 신세나 이런 것들로 어떤 도대체 대들니 바람으로 왔다 저거 그래서 디디가 방도 그 랑라지니 랑그 지도 다 마와 등 그때는 용물이 되어지 다 토파요 방문존이 디 돈트 바르투시니 다테 토토서 같은 바르투시신 말
So here I would like to suggest you do a quick self-reflection, as we have touched upon the ideas of the three different forms of individuals. The individuals divided by the capacity, and the small person with small capacity, and the individual person with the intermediate capacity, and the person with the great capacity or great being. So we know that the individual who not content with, satisfied by reborn as a human being, or born in heaven, and based on their understanding and their study, and they figured out, or they come to the conclusion, and that is, it doesn't matter how pleasurable, how powerful you are, and then if you were born as a human being, but at the end of your birth, and you have to repeat the same pattern, right? And so therefore the individual would say at that point no, that's not the ideal solution for my own purpose of life. And then also the individual who would investigate and questioning about the ultimate and the value of the heaven, or being a heavenly or celestial being. And the Buddhist literature and study and suggest and indicate that though even the durations of heavenly pleasure or the life in the heaven, it's much greater and much longer than the humans. But the end of the existence of in the heavenly being, you still have to reborn and take that unwanted suffering, which we call the pervasive suffering again, meaning you have to start the samsara, the circle of the samsara over. So therefore, the individual and who did a careful and critical investigation, and then he reached the point and draw the conclusion, say, and although born a human being, and to be a human being, to born in heaven is a great pleasure, it's much a favorable thing. However, it's still is not ultimately, and you are still not free from this the suffering of pervasive suffering, meaning that you are still subject to the common and afflictive emotions. So at that point, the individual who decided to seeking for the liberation of the nirvana as the ultimate solution, as the highest, the purpose of one's spiritual practice. So those individuals, and then they focus on their own needs, and they turn their soul and the whole intention to the path which leads them, as an individual self, lead them to the state of nirvana. And that person, that type of individual, we call the individual with the intermediate capacity.
他的让自己觉得这个天天电话打嘛，多得年年，这个多摆买呢，当初这个对待养出去本来吧，准他都不用是啥把样买吧，用的用是做把样买吧，对到的嘛是这个人啦，他妈买把你打电话的，还讲这个正气的这个他妈的有这个乱他都不等了，这里多弄嘛去，也是多呢，人不去过这个他了多少年了。 인 참고서 많이 배우고 장이 장도 진리만 그든 다시 냠치 이거니 라마니 전 지름 정도 전통 치고 tel라 로트 친구지 티고니 지금 라니 치고 다리 탑세 봤어 많이 더 생전 탐치 등을 떠니 용물이 탑을 돈바고 함 연도 용수도 과거 생전 탐치 등을 나서 저 이시트 연도 용수도 그 상시 고봉 타고 좀 뭔데 시지 요 봐, 대장 전이 뒤에 되게 그 고봉 我的现在有了几米几用啊，这个土呢，就第一这个头了，马上吧，孙先把你当做几个节目啊，上次讲话这样谈的，这一趟你看这第一个你看说这个头个节目期的，我第一个有这些。
So earlier I suggest you do a quick self-reflection and see where you are based upon this categorization of the three individuals. So we have talked about the first individual who focuses on the individual's interest for this life alone, and the individual now we've discussed is the one who wanted to free from the samsara and attain the liberation. However, they are only concerned themselves. So they are kind of a self, they love themselves, and other than address their own needs, they neglect or ignore the others, and so therefore they choose the path of the path of the Dharma, which leads them to the state of nirvana just for their own concerns or their own interests. So that individual is the individual who with the intermediate capacity. And now I would like you reflect whether you are the third category, the individual belongs to the third category, and a person with a great capacity. That is the individual who, after based upon his or her thorough investigation and studies, learning, and who reached the point where he see or she see, just for self-liberation and liberate oneself from the samsara, which is not good enough at all, which is not the ultimate solution. And even in the sense that this is kind of being too selfish. Why? Because as far as the benefits is concerned, the interests and all kinds of favorable experiences that you have ever experienced, then that is entirely dependent upon others. And in other words, so your benefits and your interest is due to the others or because of others. So therefore, as far as the free from the samsara or the obtained ultimate enlightenment is concerned, if you're just working for yourself, and then that is not morally, ethically, even not approvable. Why? Because all sentient beings has been at some point be your mother, and you owe them. Right? So, but you are now, if you're choosing or to follow the path of the capacity, the individual with the intermediate capacity, meaning you ignored, you neglected, or you left the best of all the sentient beings, you owe them kindness and you left them behind. So the highly intelligent and the individual who done the thorough investigation and who would choose the path of Bodhisattva, the Mahayana, meaning that he or she would decide to obtain the state of parinirvana, or mahaparinirvana, which means the perfect state of enlightenment, meaning to achieve the Buddhahood, not just arhat or self-realizer, but rather to be the individual fully awakened and omniscient being. And this, why? Because only by obtain become the enlightened being and become an omniscient one, and then you would have the capacity, you would have the ability, and to return the kindness and to serve all sentient beings. So therefore, individuals who choose the Mahayana path or choose the Bodhisattva path and is called the individual with great capacity or great being.
I
forgot it. So the Bodhisattva, the individual who choosing to be Bodhisattva and want to practice through the path of Bodhisattva to become Buddha, who would focus on the techniques and typically would by reflecting upon or practice 7 quintessential quintessential instructions, meaning that by reflecting upon recognize all sentient being has been mother, and you are obligated to return their kindness, and then you decided to return their kindness, and then you can develop the matter of the kindness, and then you determined to develop the compassion, and then you decided to not only wish to attain the enlightenment, but you physically pursuing the state of enlightenment. So that is one of the forms of practice the Mahayana, the followers of Mahayana or person with a great capacity would follow. And otherwise, the individual who prefer the Mahayana path would practice another methodology or the technique is called exchange yourself with others.
토마니니 마음식 같은 모양아 되는 토마를 리 동화식 지향의 대신나 다 가르쳐 버리지만나 등이 삼성 루시아나 당화도 그 제탄 그 그것을 그런데 장나 판마토나 노는 멋지대야 장나 노바시 같은 그거 있는 사람이 삼바 속초 받아서 되면 세상이 삼바 더 담자 뒤에지라잖니 뒤 당도 당화도 그 지기와 당장나 판도 샤와 가르쳐 지잖아 뒤 지금 가르쳐버리 맞아 지와시마나 나송도 멋지지요 다 지와시마 몬토로 제가 돈나서미 삼바 대통령 치트 송아이나 다 지금 중앙이 치거든요 뒤 관로로 대통령 저 대대 하는 거예요 여기는 도모텔라로 오죠 그 영지그 대리들이 다 아주 제가 노빠면 셔봐 담자는 소출 송아다고 되어질라잖아요 뒤 탑에서 다 내면 단위 정거등이 단위 그 뇽말이 다라 땡지 돈나서미 뒤 탑에서 뭐 같은 뒤 탑에서 제라나 지금 랑그 치대 버체 땡지 그렇다 지코난도 그 지금 내길 나치 홍아 연나도 소초발라서 미나노치 홍아도 제시니 대당 한테 지금 로트가 뭐나 양tam으로 제니 그 자판 현재 다음주가 밤이 셔도 그렇게 인생이 삼바테 파라로 장니 디 돈이 지금 다 지겨와 생산나 간도 지역가에는 대상으로 개발 양장을 했다나 대도 지금 친구가 지고자 받을 때 돈으로 되는 거는 지금 상으로 지하철도 동탑하나 디트가 상으로 중앙탄소가 디 무게는 늘자 다시 미만도돼야 다르다 보디 샬란저바 뭐 때문에 시작을 되는 거나 아주 지금 대처를 되는 아까도 동 속주로 공이 그 설명 타고도 제가 제치나 디 속주로 장나도 노파 각과 디 그제치니 아주 등고된데야 그 토파가 제때야 뭐 제성으로 손이 아주 지금 존치 차 각과 기르는 손이 고튼 게 뭐로 손이 좀 뭐만 정리를 등 가서 뭐 되는데 참아서 때려지다요 그래서 저니 다디 그것처럼 뭐 데이터에 되게 랑토체니 되게 타고 나서가 되니 또 시미시티 강라라를 저리라나 돈바고 상지 좀 된데 랑니께 준 다도 용서서 말하되 용서 좀 탑치서 요도 용서 조건이 화통 탈신이 설디 적다와서 돈바 디 마스터런 것들 제가 오늘 시문이와 디 이치니 받으려는 거예요. 그래서 그때 나선도 영지 돈바고 요바에는 뒤에 치대야 뭐 공부를 줘 봐나요. 좀 상수 비견다. 좀 냠내시 같은 내야나 지금 영한테 들어가 되는 비전선지 모두 그 탄다 강리시 하고 고든지야 대당 그마다 도마 돈이 무슨도 되고 손이 되고 남든지야 되니오티 제가 치고 좀 또지가 지 그마다 모두 바라티나 되게 자서 쓰고 있나요. 다 그러고 나마저 가려지나요. 이 게더 공축돼야 돼. 대인생 대당도 제가 쓰면야 돼요. 가나상지 장부시 봐. 고총 섬나 잡선조돼야 돼. 상지시로 돈바고 제부터 니치 되게 제부터 다주고 쓴 성공을 돼야 돼. 대샤선조서 돼요. 그 쪽서 다서던 그런 게 제부니스 다서 대 돈바고 다서 어디군이 또 리동원이 양슬리고 어디 백가치부터 쳐다. 대 장부 나와상지 그 쓸맛을 또 샴푸 남터지라 요는 티고니 다링을 다 냠나터 소아마서나 샴푸도 소나 티리 샴푸도 지금 중국 지코당 특미분이 잡선로서는 장당 냠설린서 지금 침부터 냠설린서 상마마 샴푸나 리더가 그래서 제가 이렇게 되는 안한 조치 나와 상지가 있는 샴푸는 이제 제가 다 리저 당들과 영나도 모든 좀 대들이 거니 또 냠나나 바라자고 들으시고 그랬어요.
Here I would like to share a little my personal humble opinions or my sense of how individually we should practice Buddhism. Right? Because our topic is about how to practice Buddhism. I personally feel that as an individual Buddhist practitioner, so we know that there are three forms of practitioners, and with the three different capacities, or divided by their own capacities. So here, our task is to choose our path correctly and carefully. So we know that the Buddhist practice is, as far as the techniques and the theories is concerned, is so vast and is so profound. Then, how we should begin our practice? I feel that we should go through those three individuals' paths, meaning that start with a lower level of the individual with a lower capacity, and just think that we are the individual have to do what the individual who with the small capacity, right? And one of the practice that a small individual with small capacity would do is abandon the actions of the killing. So, and abandoning the killing, that very action, which will ensure the individual have the opportunities and gain the adequate karma and the support itself to reborn as human being or regain a favorable rebirth. So we have to start with this very fundamental level of practice by following the 10 virtuous action, or take it a vow, which is one of the examples of the 10 virtuous vow is abandoning or restrain from the killing. And then once we secure ourselves, that we're able to free ourselves from such an evil, horrible action of killing, then we can move on to think about our fundamental need as an individual, that is to free from samsara, right? And by fully realize or manifest the nirodha, or the path of noble path of cessation, meaning that that ideal state of nirvana, state of cessation, and fully manifested, transformed into our very own being. So we have to work on that. But then, once we kind of certain about the qualities and the values of this practice, and then we do need to think about move on to the third level, and that is the individual with great capacity, or the Bodhisattva, meaning that we needed to think about, like we talked earlier, so to be Bodhisattva means that you will become a fully enlightened one, and you will have the capacity, and you will be able to fully address not only free yourself from the causes suffering, suffering and cause of suffering. In this case, is pervasive suffering, but you will have the wisdom and skillful means and to serve all others. So, which means that you are now choosing the Buddhist Sattva's path as your very spiritual journey, the path of your spiritual journey. Right? Now, at this point, I'd like to invite you to think about how you can actually put your own hands into engaging and the practice on a daily basis. That is, you have to know it is crucial, it is essential for you to generate the mind of refuge. So the generation of mind of refuge means you are seeking for a teacher, a mentor, an instructor who is going to lead you out of the samsaric condition, your sufferings, and cause of suffering. At this point, you choose the Buddha, the fully awakening, and as your teacher. And then, next, you needed to develop, generate the mind of refuge by seeking protection from the Dharma. The Dharma here, although we generally speaking, Dharma means that the Buddhist teaching, Buddhist path, or Buddhist practice, but literally speaking, after you adopted taking Buddha as your teacher and decide to follow him, and next you needed to explicitly or directly working on the teaching and the path which leads you to the nirvana, the state of nirvana, state of noble truth of the cessation. And so how you do it? Again, like we talked earlier, so you needed to investigate the root cause of your samsaric reality, the suffering, which is the grasping as self of the person, or the misperception of self. So you need to address and need to develop the antidotes or the counter, the force which can free you from this misperception of suffering, which serves as the root cause of suffering. So, and then by understanding the selflessness of person, which means the shunyata or emptiness. The emptiness of the self of the person, or the shunyata, or the no self, and which is again, it's this form of suffering which we talk about is the cause of the all suffering. So this will lead you to the point where you find the seeking for the Dharma as your ultimate protection and or protector. Not only just Buddha. You follow Buddha, now you move to the Dharma, his teaching. You look at his teaching and his whatever the theories and practice he introduced to you, which is now is serve as your protection, as the protector of you, and then leads you to the state of enlightenment. And upon having this Buddha's teacher and the Dharma as your path, as protector, and you develop the refuge mind and Buddha Dharma, now you need to develop the mind of refuge in the Sangha. So here when we talk about Sangha, we have to know Sangha not necessarily only refer to the ordained monk or nun or monastic community, but rather whoever is fully dedicated to Buddha Dharma and who is have the absolute conviction and working on the path of Nirvana, and then even they are layperson, the householder, and they are also the part of the Sangha. So at this point, as far as the first step, the essential step is concerned, we fully developed the mind of a refuge. Now we're seeking, we recognize seeking the enlightenment by taking Buddha as our teacher, by taking Dharma as our path, and by taking Sangha community as our spiritual assistants or friends. So by doing that, that means you are fully become a Buddhist or seekers of enlightenment.
他也到这个八戒，咱们这个他做这个阿祖这个 딩글 먼저 봤다. 대화 너 봐야니까 타르트 대화 그냥 좀 대화 타르 상식고 먼저 봤다. 이렇게부터 양어진 대화 양진한테 자줘봐. 그렇게 일을 유니버시티도 봐. 그 양지 총화 시민문도 도봐. 디더를 제대로 루트지고니 아주 그 랑을 키워서 지를 받아야 된중화도 대답 그 용사용 통발선에 좀 되지 대시 그동안 뒤더니 아주 지금 대통령이 되어서 좀 대형의 자원당 지금 공부 지금 나와서지 사를 다적 그 양면제 다스고도 뒤통이 상마지 제대로 받는 디 상마가 쳐서 그러다 지금 루지 전부터로 인시텐딩가 따뜻 다도 운동되나 나와서지 치 양면 가르치실 거라지나 타건 것이 바라지 장조 나버다고 대도 양면 제나 디 나도 마디 나와서지 치면로 장조에 대한 치 미시와도 그 영이 시와도 그 영 말고 총총이 많이 봐 하정이 되지 어디서 정도 어디 지금 다 장조에 대 잡조에 대 문도비 등일이 잡니 타르트 대화는 로이 타르트는 어때다고가 장로들가 잡시 고하는 처음이야. 뒤에 냠는데가 나한테 가르치지가 토같이 좀 지금 있나요? 장로나 마디가 매봐. 어디서 저다 우리 시티 돈이 더 단지 더 어디서 시원한